my partner, Elise, and I had moved to the edge of town in the dead of winter, looking for a break from the chaos of city life. The house we bought was older than it looked online, a sprawling two-story with peeling paint and creaking floors, but it sat at the end of a long, wooded driveway and promised privacy. That was exactly what we wanted. Or at least, we thought we did. The first few nights were quiet in the way snow makes everything quiet, muffled, soft, almost unnatural. We lit a fire and watched movies, occasionally glancing out the large living room windows into the dark expanse of pines behind the house. The isolation felt peaceful, almost magical. It didn't take long for that sense of calm to vanish. On the second evening, I was in the kitchen chopping vegetables for dinner when Elise called out. "Did you hear that?" I froze. Outside, the wind rattled the old windows, but beneath it, I thought I could hear the faint crunch of boots against the fresh snow. "I don't think so," I replied, brushing it off. "Probably just the wind." Elise didn't seem convinced. She stayed close to the doorway, eyes scanning the shadows beyond the kitchen. A few minutes later she whispered, "I feel like someone's out there." I laughed nervously and went to the window, peering into the black trees. The snow reflected moonlight faintly, and I could see nothing, but the unease had already settled in. Later that night, we were getting ready for bed when we noticed something strange. The back door, which we had locked and double-checked before turning in, was slightly ajar. Not just unlocked, ajar, as if someone had been in a hurry to slip out quietly. "Did you leave it open?" I asked Elise. "No," she said immediately. Her voice was low, tense. We checked the rest of the house, every door, every window. Nothing else was disturbed. Still, the feeling of being watched crept over us. I locked the door again and placed a chair against it, but sleep was impossible. Around 2 a.m., I woke to the sound of footsteps, soft, deliberate, moving across the floor above us. The sound stopped just outside our bedroom. I whispered to Elise to stay still. The footsteps retreated slowly, fading into silence. I spent the rest of the night sitting against the wall, listening, heart pounding. By morning, I had convinced myself it could have been a dream, or maybe the old house settling. But when Elise went to make coffee, she found a series of small footprints in the dust on the hardwood floor, too large to belong to any of us, leading down the hallway and ending abruptly near the staircase. We didn't speak of it much, but the tension between us grew. Whoever, or whatever, was in the house wasn't here to rob us. They had been watching. And judging by the footprints, they had moved through rooms we hadn't even opened in months. The next evening, snow began falling again, thick and relentless. We thought it might be the perfect excuse to stay inside, ignore the uneasy feeling, and focus on each other. But by 7:30, the tension returned, heavier than before. I was in the living room, trying to read, when Elise suddenly froze in the doorway. Her eyes were wide. "What is it?" I asked. She didn't answer. I followed her gaze toward the far corner of the room, and that's when I saw it, a shadow, faint but deliberate, moving just beyond the second-story railing. It didn't belong to us. I grabbed a flashlight and slowly made my way upstairs. Every creak of the floorboards sounded deafening in the silence. The second floor was empty, but the air had changed. It smelled faintly metallic, like machinery or chemicals, something out of place in a house meant to be lived in. Then I heard it, a door clicking shut somewhere behind us. Elise gasped, and I spun around. The hall was empty. But the sound had come from the small office at the end of the hall, the one we had kept locked because it had broken shelves and dust-covered furniture. We exchanged a look and moved together toward the door. I hesitated before turning the knob. It was unlocked. Inside, the room looked ordinary at first glance, but the closer we got, the more we noticed. Hidden compartments in the walls, fresh footprints in the dust, and stacks of papers and electronic devices we didn't recognize. Someone had been living here, using our house as a secret base. Then the sudden realization hit us. This wasn't just someone squatting. The setup suggested surveillance, operations, maybe even illegal activity. We hadn't just been watched, we had been studied. Elise's hand gripped mine, cold and trembling. "We need to leave," she whispered. We backed out of the office carefully, every shadow seeming to twitch and shift with unseen movement. That's when we heard it, footsteps descending the staircase. Not panicked, not running, methodical, controlled, deliberate. Someone was coming toward us. I grabbed Elise and pulled her into a nearby room, locking the door behind us. We pressed ourselves against the wall, listening. The footsteps paused outside. Then, slowly, they moved away. Not out the door, not downstairs, but just moved away, as if they were choosing not to confront us yet. We waited for what felt like hours before peeking out. The hall was empty, but a chill ran through us. Whoever had been in our home was still here, hiding, watching, planning. We called the police immediately. When they arrived, they found evidence of long-term occupation, hidden spaces, makeshift living areas, and strange equipment. But there was no sign of the intruder. Not a trace. We left that night, abandoning the house we thought would bring peace. Even now, months later, I can't shake the feeling of eyes watching us in the snow, tracking our every step. The secret someone left behind in that house, what they were doing, why they were watching, remains unresolved, a shadow in the woods that may never leave. I moved out to the edge of town because I wanted quiet. Not the kind of quiet you get in the suburbs where traffic hums in the distance, but real quiet, the kind where snow absorbs sound and the woods feel like they're holding their breath. My house sat at the end of a narrow road, surrounded by tall pines and wide stretches of white. Other homes existed somewhere beyond the trees, but they might as well have been miles away. That weekend, a heavy snowfall rolled in, sealing me off from the rest of the world. My phone signal was weak, the road was barely visible, and I hadn't seen another person since Friday afternoon. I didn't mind. Being alone had always been comforting to me. The first night passed without incident, but something about the second night felt different. The house seemed larger once darkness settled in, the corners deeper, the windows more reflective. I kept the lights on longer than usual, moving from room to room just to hear my own footsteps. When I finally went to bed, the wind picked up, brushing against the trees behind the house. That's when I heard the crunch. It wasn't wind. It wasn't an animal. It was the unmistakable sound of weight pressing into snow. I lay still, listening. Another crunch followed, closer this time. Slow. Deliberate. My bedroom had a wide window facing the woods. During the day, it filled the room with soft light. At night, it turned into a dark mirror. I stared at it, my own reflection barely visible, heart pounding hard enough to feel in my throat. Something moved between the trees. Not fast. Not sudden. Just a shift, like a shape adjusting its stance. I couldn't make out details, only that whatever it was stood upright. I told myself it was nothing. My eyes playing tricks on me. The cold, the isolation. Still, I didn't sleep much after that. The next day, I noticed small things that didn't feel right. A chair slightly out of place. A door I was sure I'd closed now opened just enough to notice. I tried to laugh it off, blaming my own forgetfulness, but the uneasy feeling stayed with me like a shadow. That night, snow began falling again, thick and heavy. I watched television to distract myself, wrapped in a blanket, convincing myself that no one would be wandering around in a storm like that. When I got up to grab a drink, I noticed the light in the back room was off. I distinctly remembered leaving it on. I flipped it back on and returned to the couch, telling myself I was being paranoid. Less than a minute later, the light went out again. I didn't move at first. I just stared down the hallway, my body frozen as my mind raced through every explanation that didn't involve someone else being in the house. But when I stood up and looked closer, the light switch was flipped down. Someone had touched it. My phone was charging in the bedroom. My keys were near the front door. I knew I needed both, but the thought of moving through the house made my skin crawl. Every step felt loud, like an announcement. I took the hallway slowly, listening. That's when I heard it, a soft shuffle, followed by the faint creak of a floorboard that wasn't beneath my feet. I grabbed my phone and turned toward the window without thinking. Footprints cut through the fresh snow outside. They stopped just inches from the glass. A figure stood there, tall and unmoving. I couldn't see a face, only the outline of a head tilted slightly forward, as if it knew exactly where I was standing. The glass reflected my fear back at me, merging my face with the darkness beyond. Behind me, something else moved. Then another sound, footsteps from the opposite side of the house. There wasn't just one. I ran. I didn't bother grabbing anything else. I tore through the front door and into the cold, my breath burning as I sprinted toward my car. Snow flew beneath my boots. Behind me, I heard running, fast, heavy, desperate. I got into the car and slammed the door just as a shadow rounded the corner of the house. The engine roared to life, tires spinning before gripping the ice. As I sped away, I saw him standing there, perfectly still, watching me leave. I didn't stop until I reached the main road. The police arrived later that night. What they found didn't make sense. Windows shattered from the inside. Furniture overturned. Doors ripped from their hinges. It looked like a storm had torn through the place, but no storm could explain the marks in the walls or the way entire rooms had been destroyed. They asked me how many people I thought were inside. I told them I heard more than one. They never found anyone. The footprints were gone by morning, buried beneath fresh snow. No signs of forced entry. No explanation for how long they'd been watching, or why they didn't follow me. I sold the house a month later. Even now, years later, winter still makes me uneasy. When snow falls and the world grows quiet, I sometimes feel that same sensation, that someone is standing just out of sight, waiting for the lights to go off again. And I know, somewhere out there, the mystery remains unresolved. Winter had settled over our little rural home like a heavy, silent blanket. My son, Luke, had just turned 17, and I had been looking forward to a quiet week while his school was on winter break. The kind of week where we could stay in, drink cocoa, watch movies, and not worry about the outside world. Our house wasn't isolated, exactly. It was at the edge of a small town, surrounded by dense woods, but the neighboring houses were far enough away that it often felt like we were the only ones for miles. That night, the wind howled outside, rattling the old windows and making the bare trees sway against the moonlight. Luke and I had just finished dinner when I noticed him staring toward the living room window, unusually still. "Luke, what's wrong?" I asked, setting down my mug. "I thought I saw someone outside," he whispered. "I don't know. It was just a shadow moving behind the trees." I frowned. The yard was blanketed in fresh snow, footsteps easily visible. "Probably just a deer or a stray dog," I said, though my voice lacked conviction. Later that night, I couldn't shake the feeling that we weren't alone. I kept hearing faint creaks from the attic, or maybe from the floorboards, as though someone else was moving around upstairs. At first, I convinced myself it was the house settling in the cold, but the feeling persisted, like eyes were tracing our every move. The next morning, Luke came running into the kitchen holding a small, worn notebook he'd found wedged under the couch cushions. "Mom, look at this," he said, handing it to me. The pages were filled with precise, handwritten observations, notes about the layout of our living room, the time we usually went upstairs, even descriptions of us eating breakfast. My stomach dropped. "Where did you find this?" I asked. "Under the couch," he said. "I thought it was strange, so I opened it. Someone's been watching us." I felt my pulse spike. Whoever had left this notebook wasn't just outside. They had been inside. I spent the day checking every corner of the house, closets, under beds, behind furniture. Nothing. No sign of forced entry, nothing missing, no footprints anywhere except ours. Yet the notebook proved someone had been inside, observing us carefully, perhaps for weeks. That evening, I locked all the doors and windows, double-checked them twice, and told Luke not to go near the windows. But the unease didn't leave. Around midnight, A faint tapping started on the window in his room. At first, I thought it was branches scraping in the wind. Then I heard a soft shuffle on the porch outside. Luke was awake too, frozen in bed. I grabbed my phone and shined a flashlight toward the window. Snow covered most of the yard, but there, just beyond the glass, I could see footprints leading up to the side of the house, stopping abruptly at the corner. No one was there now. I called the police, but by the time they arrived, there was nothing to find. Just fresh snow, undisturbed aside from the footprints leading up and away from the house. They told me to stay alert, to keep the doors locked, but they couldn't guarantee anything. I spent the next few days on edge. Every small sound, the creak of a floorboard, a shadow shifting across the room, made my heart race. And then, yesterday, I found another notebook, this one hidden in the small pantry near the kitchen. It wasn't just observations this time. It had diagrams of the house, detailed notes about how we moved throughout it, even comments on what Luke ate for breakfast. Whoever was doing this wasn't just watching, they were planning, cataloging, tracking. That night, the unease escalated. The snowstorm outside made the roads impassable, so we were trapped. I stayed awake in the living room while Luke slept, flashlight in hand, every muscle tense. Around 2 a.m. I heard it, a soft, deliberate knock on the back door. Not random, not like wind or branches. Someone had been waiting for me to notice. I didn't respond. I stayed perfectly still, listening. The knock repeated, slower this time, deliberate and patient, as though the person outside knew I couldn't see them. My mind raced. How had they been moving around our house without us noticing? The notebooks, the hidden notes, they weren't just observing. They had been inside, tracing our patterns, learning our habits. The next morning, Luke refused to leave his room. I could hardly blame him. Even I felt watched, every step, every glance across the living room a potential target for unseen eyes. That afternoon, I decided to investigate the attic. I had never gone up there alone. It was full of boxes and old furniture, but something told me that if someone had been hiding, that was where they might have stayed. I climbed the narrow staircase, my flashlight sweeping over dust-covered furniture and old boxes. Then I saw it, more notebooks, stacked neatly in a corner. But these were different. They weren't just notes. They contained diagrams of escape routes, timelines of our day, even sketches of Luke and me sleeping. Whoever had written these wasn't just curious. They were meticulous, calculating, and dangerously close. I brought the notebooks downstairs, showing them to Luke. His face went pale. "Mom, they know everything about us," he whispered. Night fell again, and with it, the fear returned. I stayed awake, flashlight in hand, keeping watch over Luke as he slept. Hours passed without incident, but around 1 a.m., I heard footsteps on the porch. Not light ones, heavy enough to press into the snow, stop, shift, and retreat. My heart pounded. Whoever it was, they were still out there, still tracking us. We called the police again. This time, they found nothing, just footprints leading into the woods, disappearing as though whoever it was had vanished into thin air. No forced entry, no signs of struggle, no answers. Now, days later, I still can't shake the feeling of being watched. Every time Luke leaves the room, I check the windows. Every sound makes me flinch. The notebooks remain hidden in a locked drawer, but I know that doesn't stop someone from watching. They've studied us, memorized our habits, and possibly returned to the house while we sleep, unseen. We're trapped in our own home, winter pressing against the walls, the forest hiding unknown eyes. And as long as the snow falls and the wind howls, I can't shake the certainty that we are still being observed, and that one day, whoever it is may finally step out of the shadows.